Hello, welcome to the latest edition of Old Scribes. My name is Matt Aguilar with my partner George Willis, and we have a special guest today, a very esteemed guest, Nigel Collins, a two-time editor of The Ring magazine, KO magazine, World Boxing, member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and author of many books, including his latest, Hooking Off the Jab. Nigel, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Oh, thank you. It's great. I love stuff like this. I could talk about boxing forever, and thanks for plugging my book.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in here. Big news this week. With your former publication, Ring Magazine, being sold by Oscar De La Hoya to Turki Al-Sheikh, who's making a lot of waves lately in the boxing world. So what, you've put a lot of your life into Ring Magazine, a lot of your career into it. What are your thoughts on this sale?
Well, there's probably quite a few thoughts that I had when I don't know who it was. It was a very long press release that was telling all about it, probably from somebody in Saudi Arabia, but didn't have a byline. What I thought was humorous was that they gave the same assurances that Golden Boy gave to me. That they wouldn't interfere at all with the editorial. And Oscar said at the time, well, if we do that, we'll ruin the Ming magazine. Well, we had a honeymoon period of about maybe a year and a half, something like that. And then they started to violate it. The one thing that has started it, Richard Schaefer called me and said that Shane Mosley should be number one in the rankings. And I think we had him number two. So I treated him just like I would any manager or promoter who, you get those sort of calls all the time. And I just told him, we weren't going to do it. He never spoke to me again. But though I kept going with the Ring for a while. When somebody does that to you, using pretty much the same words, I can't really believe it, tell you the truth. At some point, a lot of people think that they're buying the Ring to fix the rankings. Now, I have no proof of that because it hasn't really started yet. And how do you prove somebody's fixing anything, But if they follow some of the rules that I put in when I had bought the Ring belt back and had a new policy for how we would rank fighters and what you had to do to be champion, they'll be fine. But I think that it would be very unusual if they didn't violate, interfere with it. I hope they don't. And then let the editors and the writers do what they want to do. But as I had a very nasty experience with that, it just doesn't seem, that they're honest about it.
Right. It doesn't seem realistic, too, probably in this day and age. Your former colleague, Eric Raskin, wrote a really good article about how in today's boxing landscape, almost every writer is tied to some sort of corporation or to some type of something that makes you not as unbiased as you'd like to be. And, that may have been true even, 10, 20 years ago, but I feel like it's probably very true today. That's kind of what it was.
Like Golden Boy, gave me all the assurances, and there were press releases, and so everybody knew about it. And I think it lasted about 5 years. But here's the funny thing about how they got rid of me. I had a performance review, but I was the only one in the company that had one, and it was full of lies, half-truths, and total bullshit. And I told my lawyer about it, and she said, "This is what you got to do. You've got to answer every question. And so I did that. And when I handed it back to the lawyer, he said, "You'll be hearing from us." Well, I didn't hear from them for a whole year. But I knew, it's hard to work for somebody that hates you. But I just did the job as I always did. I didn't take any nonsense from any promoter. I always treated them, respectfully, or any manager, and people knew that, so they didn't really bother to do it after they found out the kind of guy I was. But it's Eric's column was great, and the thing is that I don't know if you ever heard of it. We had a ringside seat publication, and it was a very classy publication. I recruited a lot of the old ring writers, and it was probably, I had more freedom there than any time, and it was very good. Like, if you had the digital version, it was a paper version, but you have the digital version where you could turn on a page about a fighter or a fight. There was a little icon, and you could click on the icon, and there would be a video, maybe about a fight they had or whatever was in the article. They would have, not on every page or every picture. So that was a kind of cool thing too, I would like to hope that this works out great for everybody. I mean, I've been doing some writing for Dougie Fischel for a couple of years now. They paid well. So I hope everything goes well. But what you hope is not always what happens.
Yeah, I remember, growing up back in the day, as they say, you would get your Sports Illustrated, and you'd maybe try to sneak in the Playboy of the month, and then you always had, the Ring magazine. Those were the things that you looked for, and it was the Bible of boxing. That's where you got all your information, your update on the fighters, and
yeah. I mean, I worked for them freelance for more than a decade before I became a staffer, and it was Bert Sugar that hired me.
Oh, wow! And
we had a relationship before that. He knew who I was, and I'd done some couple of cover stories for him. About 4 or 5 months after I was there, Bert was fired. I ended up being the editor-in-chief, and then Stanley Weston bought the publication. I didn't really want to move, so I turned down the job to be the editor of that, and Steve Farhood did a good job. There are certain things, like I did columns for ESPN for about 5 years. I don't know if you knew that. They would let me write what I wanted, but there were certain words you couldn't use. It's kind of crazy. And also, when Manny Pacquiao got involved in politics, first he became a representative, then a senator, and I wanted to write about it for ESPN. And they said, "Oh, no politics." I said, "This isn't American politics. It's Filipino politics." So other than that, they were pretty good. And I liked doing the columns. And they were actually, Matt Sanduli was the executive editor of the Friday Night Fights. He's the one that hired me at ESPN. And as we were going along, he was gradually working me into the show on camera. And you get more money when you're on camera. Mm-hmm. But they folded the Friday Night Fights after, what was it? I don't know how many years. It was in the teens, I believe, because they wanted the free money from Al Heyman. And the Friday Night Fights went, and so did the job. I continued writing columns for a while, and the reason I left there, it was not bad. It was just the typical corporate cut down because they didn't want to spend any more money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Quick question on the. I'm going back to the Ring real quick. 100-year-old publication. American institution, really, and now it's not going to be, it's not going to be owned by an American anymore. And it is interesting too that an American Olympian is the one that sold it to, But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I had no way of knowing that, what if they made any money when Golden Boy bought the ring. And I doubt if they did, but maybe they did. But it certainly wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the 10 million Oscar got for selling it? Yeah. So the thing about Saudi Arabia, a lot of big fights have been over there because they've just got so much money they can do whatever they want. And I've been very happy for the fighters. Some of them I know personally, and other ones that I've been following their careers and writing about them. So that was the good thing about it, that these guys are getting a lot of money. And let's face it, boxers need a lot of money. But other than that, I don't know. I just have mixed feelings about it. But then when I think about, this Saudi Arabia has done a lot of bad things. So has the United States. So, it's very difficult. But I don't know they even want me to do anything. It's Doug. I've been writing a series article for Doug, and I was doing one on George Foreman. And when I found out that the sale had gone through, he told me they were going to be sold, but didn't tell me who was going to buy it. But I guessed who it was going to be. I was almost finished this George Foreman piece, so I emailed him and said, "Do you want me to finish it?" And he said, "Well, it was up to me, yes. But I've got to speak to the big boss. I don't even know who that is." So I don't know. I think Dougie sort of doesn't know too much. If you go on the link for their website, it just says "coming soon." There's nothing, no articles or anything. So boxing always goes where the money is, and it was Al Heyman who blew about, I think it was like $500 million. He was doing, like 200 fighters, and he was doing many, many fights. I think he did four fights last year, but he overspent. But I don't think the people in Saudi Arabia, that's probably not possible. But it's I'm getting old now. I'm almost at the point where I don't really give a shit. It's been my life for so long, and I still enjoy it on TV or at a fight. I was at Boots' fight in Philly last Saturday. I still enjoy writing, but if they don't give me any work, and I really wouldn't. I haven't decided if they do want me to work for them, whether I would or I wouldn't. But that's just up in the air. But it's just okay if they don't want me. That's fine. I really don't care. Ring magazine, until this happened, was paying freelancers more than any other boxing publication. Well, they're paying me. I don't know what they pay everybody, but so that was cool. You know what I mean? Much more money than I do in other freelance clients. So I like that. And, I don't know what's going to happen to me personally, other than hoping that everything goes well for the ring.
Where do you see, there's been this big transition probably over the last at least decade or maybe even 2 decades, where you've gone from the print traditional newspapers covering the sport to a bunch of internet sites covering the sports to now, as we mentioned, seems like each of them have a little piece of where they're obligated to, to write about, because some of these promotions are paying their way to fights. They're giving some subsidies to them to make sure that they write about their sport. I mean, where is the legitimacy and the professionalism going to come from?
Well, I say that obviously depends on the people who are, running it. The thing is that when I was at Ring Magazine, nobody ever gave me any money except my employer. I never offered any in any of the magazines and TV things I've done. So it didn't really, I mean, it killed my job as editor of The Ring, but the Golden Boy were the first people that did that. I always worked for a publisher, and they're the ones that paid me. You kind of, one of the thing is that, like, the people who want to read boxing, they want to read about the big time fights and the big time fighters. And if you're doing that, they don't really have to try to bribe you. You know what I mean? I mean, if Manny Pacquiao is going to have a fight, or Floyd Mayweather or Canelo, they don't have to bribe anybody to watch those shows because they're big time, and that's what the people want. Now, I think that any of the crookedness in the fights themselves, like bad decisions, horrible bad decisions, they're not really paying off anybody. Nobody's paying them off to do it. It's done through the judges, the referees, and in other words, instead of the mob paying off some guy to take a dive or to have a decision that was unfair, it's not done through the fighters and the fighters' managers. It's done through the athletic commission and their employees.
Go ahead, George.
I was going to say, I just wanted to know a little bit about your background. We like to hear at Old Scribes podcast, like to have the people we have on talk about how they got started in the sport and who were some of their biggest influences growing up.
Well, my father and my grandfather were big boxing fans. Let me say up front, I was born in England. So England is the birthplace of modern boxing. And as you know, they fill Wimbledon with 90,000 people. So it's more, believe it or not, more part of the culture in England than it is in the United States. But you can make more money in the United States, sort of thing. But it was my father and grandfather. They told me, my father always talked about Archie Moore and Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis. They were like the trinity in our household. And my grandfather told me about bare knuckle fighters. And I always thought that was, my grandfather told a lot of stories. It turned out all the stories he told me were true. So it was those two guys that got me into it. And I didn't have a television, or our family didn't have a television until I was 13 or 14. So I wasn't watching boxing on TV, but I was following it. And when we came to the United States and got a TV, that was a big deal. We could watch all the fights. And at that time, they used to show big time fights, like maybe a week after at the movie house. We did, we would do that a lot. When I was in high school, I was the only guy that had a pair of boxing gloves. And there was a funny story, if you don't mind me telling me a funny story. There were two of my friends in high school, both were going after the same girl, okay? And they wanted to have a fight, not like a street fight, but a boxing match. And the girl came up to me one day at school and said, Nigel, can you stop them from doing that? I didn't want to stop them, so I didn't even say anything about her. But this is the funny part. One of the guys knocked out the other guy in the first round wearing gloves because he'd been up drinking with me all night. So he didn't have much. I was the referee. So the bottom line is, I started going out with the girl they were fighting about. So the referee got the girl. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So as I said, I became the ring correspondent for Philadelphia and Atlantic City in the 70s. And the 70s, when Russell Peltz had the Spectrum boxing program, they were great. I mean, he brought in not just the big local fighters, Duran fought there, a lot of famous, Emil Griffith. That was a wonderful era. And one of the reasons is that all the money basically came from selling tickets. Now, you got to put on good fights if you want to sell tickets. You can put anything on TV and they'll watch it. So then when that ended, it was Atlantic City, because they'd always had like maybe 2 fights down the shore, during the summer. So that was just a small part of my beat. Whenever they had those, I covered those. So actually, when the casinos came spending millions and millions of dollars on boxing, I was already, the guy from Atlantic City for Ring Magazine. And it was that time that I formed a friendship with Bert, and eventually they hired me. So I just love it. And, I think everybody says that once you're in boxing, you're in it forever. It's just like you're a junkie. And I'm a boxing junkie, although not quite as active as I used to be.
In your long history at Ring Magazine, you actually gave me my chance for writing for Ring Magazine. So I want to thank you for that. You were covering the Oscar De La Hoya, Patrick Charpentier super fight at the Sun Bowl in El Paso.
Yeah. That was a great boxing trip. We went down we had a rental car, right? Me and Dave Gerhardt, who was our marketing guy. And was a Japanese photographer. I forget which one it was. We went to Mexico one night. And the rental car told us, whatever you do, don't take this car to Mexico, But we did. And we were trying to tell a cab driver who was only speaking Spanish, and the guy from Japan had broken English. I mean, I could understand him, but he wasn't very fluent. And the conversation between those 2 guys, the guy that could only speak Spanish and the other guy that was basically spoke Japanese, it was great. But we had a lot of fun there. You remember Chris Farina, the photographer? He worked for Top Rank. He was with us too. I forgot him. And I've always enjoyed the underbelly of life, which is boxing. And they had a great market there. It's Juarez, just right across the river. And the deeper you go into the market, the cooler it is, You could see the prostitutes hanging out the window, and where they weren't just selling, belts and stuff. Chris Farina was scared to come with me, and after that, we always knew he was a pussy. He was a friend of mine, so I can say that. But that was a great trip. That was one of my very favorite boxing trips, along with going to the Philippines to give Manny Pacquiao his belt, and going to Jamaica to see Simon Brown fight and stuff like that. But it's one of the things that's cool. You get to go a lot of places you might not have ever been.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that one, because sometimes they want you to go in on Friday, and for the Saturday fight. But for that particular fight, for some reason, we were down there for about 4 days, so we had time to make fun. It was a terrible fight. I mean, it was a shame because they had so many people there. Over 40,000 people. Yep. And they were all excited, they were cheering and all that. But it was so terrible, the opponent, that it really, I don't know if a lot of the crowd realized how bad he was, but all the boxing writers did, because I think there were people there that don't usually go to fights.
Yeah.
That was when Oscar De La Hoya was treated like a rock star. They had like a gym that was supposed to be a secret workout. The women went there and filled it up, the weigh-in. When we were going to the weigh-in, in order to get into the parking lot, the police had to shove all the girls over to one side so we could get in. I don't know if you went to that. You probably experienced some of that. On the weather, even they had little like logos on the weather, with Oscar's picture on it, and that was part of the reason he filled up arenas for a long time, because the women loved him, and he is a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
So working Oscars, I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but I did go down there. They wanted me to spend a week with Oscar and write about it. And of course, I didn't go to home with him at night, but most of the day we spent together. And what I noticed more than anything else was his relationship with the fans. He never turned down an autograph or a photo. And not all boxers want to do that.
Right.
And he was one of the biggest fighters in the world at that point.
Absolutely.
And he seemed to be a very nice guy. I know we had some problems. And actually, when they fired me, somebody told me that Oscar didn't know I was fired for about 3 weeks.
Wow.
I don't think he really cared, but it was just kind of funny to find that out. Richard Schaefer was a real son of a bitch.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard he's getting back into boxing.
He did have another promotion, basically in Europe. I forget what it was called, but it was like the Ring. Well, you know what he did when he was with the Ring? He was signing up fighters and telling Oscar he signed him up to Golden Boy, but he was signing them up for Al Heyman.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And Oscar didn't know it until everything was over. Although he did sue and get a nice lot of money from them because they had all the evidence. So. Yeah, Richard Schaefer's, it's funny. Somebody said to me once, when I wasn't doing what Richard Schaefer told me to do, they said, bankers always think that people are going to do what they tell them to do. But, I don't have any money. So, it's been a very interesting career. George Sugar was a lot of fun. Boy, was he a lot of fun. But he spent he improved the magazine tremendously after Lou Fleischer, Nat LeBay left. He was the guy that was he was the son-in-law of Nat Fleischer, and he took over. And the magazine was terrible at that time. But they put Muhammad Ali on the cover almost every month, and they made a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah. So, Bert, other than getting to the magazine on the printer on time, which is very, very important, it was just party time, and I just went right with them. It was. I thought it was going to last forever, but it didn't, of course. And after that, we found out. I stayed for some time after Bert left that there was an embezzlement. The embezzlement, I won't say his name, was an ex-fighter who was the controller. It was really weird. Like, if there's a freelance writer, I would get this form and say, what the story is, what the writer is, and I send it to the writer, and he'd sign it, and then they would get paid. So a couple of times, there would be duplicate checks. Like they wrote 2 checks instead of 1, and we found out because after he was fired and Bert was gone, they were being cashed right around the corner, at the bank. So hey, listen, boxing's an outlaw sport. It always has been and always will be, and the boxers are not always the outlaws. That's for sure.
Right.
And so, your whole time covering boxing, your whole career, is there one fighter or one subject that stands out to you the most, that you enjoyed covering the most, talking to the most? Who stands out for you?
Well, first, I think they've got to have two groups: the Philadelphia fighters and everybody else. My favorite fighter is Benny Briscoe. But also at the same time, he was, he had a long career. Jeff Chandler and Matthew Saad Muhammad. So those three guys are, some of my most favorite fighters. Saad had a very sad ending. The last time I saw Jeff Chandler, he didn't know who I was. So, that's part of boxing as well. Very few get out with no problems. I remember Sugar Ray Robinson. After he finished boxing, he was in movies. He did a lot of public appearances, and he was great for about 15 years. And then suddenly, boom, just like that, it all caught up with him. So it's not, it's very strange, but to go back to your question, outside of the Philadelphia fighters that I just mentioned, Manny Pacquiao. I love Manny Pacquiao because he fought hard, he fought everybody, and he always fought to knock you out, whether he did or not. I liked Oscar when he was fighting, and I even liked Mayweather the first half of his career. The first half of his career, they were exciting fights. The second half of his career, it was jab, throw the right hand, and clinch. And they were very boring, but he was actually selling his unbeaten record and his lifestyle. That's really got him to become a multimillionaire the second part of his career. Other fighters I loved was Marvin Hagler, of course. He was one of my favorites. Because he fought in Philadelphia. That's where he made his bones, beating Philadelphia middleweights. And he got a lot friendlier after he got a lot of money. I remember the first time I met him, he was in town to fight a Philly fighter. I don't know which one it was. And one of the Petronelli brothers and Russell Peltz and I went to the hotel where they were staying. And the four of us, including Marvin, had dinner together. And Marvin said hello, and then he said goodbye. And we were eating for about an hour, hour and a half. So he was very reserved and didn't really, but he changed. He changed as he went along and became friendly and, a lot more open. And because he had finally got success. I mean, remember when he fought, I think it was Vito? And DeFermo, ended up a draw. It wasn't a draw. And that was in he'd already had 40-something fights by then. No and, and then HBO got a hold of him and he started to make money.
You talked about Floyd, the second half of Floyd's career. Do you think that blueprint, that sort of negative blueprint that he established, has sort of infiltrated boxing to where fighters think that's the way to go once they have a name and they get established? I'm thinking about especially Canelo.
Well, I don't think they're anybody that did it just like him, like Floyd, because, it was the fact that he was a multimillionaire and unbeaten was what the fans is that's what they were actually being sold, but they probably didn't know it. And it's different for different boxers, They all have different personalities. They all work with the media in different ways, as I'm sure you know, Matthew. Like, for instance, most boxers are nice, very friendly. Will tell you their life story, good and bad. There were only a couple that were very hard to work with. And Pernell Whitaker was probably the king of being hard to work with. And Mike Rossman, the light heavyweight champion, the Jewish light heavyweight champion, he didn't have a very good personality. Those are two that stuck out. To say the nice guys, I'd be just saying their names all night.
That's good.
Okay. Quick topic. Change topics real quick.
Right.
What are your? We have a fight kind of coming up on Friday. Tyson, a guy you covered extensively, back in
Oh,
the
by the
ring.
way, nice. Mike Tyson was always very good to me. I just wanted to get that in there. Go ahead.
Well, on that note, how do you feel about him being back in the ring at age 58?
Well, yeah, I mean, he had that exhibition with Roy Jones. And I didn't watch it. Snoop Dogg's greatest line from he was doing the play-by-play was, "They look like two of my uncles fighting at a barbecue." But I understand. I don't know if either of you guys saw it, but I was told for people that did that Mike eased up on Roy about the second half of the exhibition. It's sort of fascinating. If Mike hits him, I think he's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not as fast as he used to be. And Jake Paul, even though he hasn't fought anybody, of note, ex-football players and basketball players, and he lost to the only journeyman real fighter that he fought. But I appreciate the fact that he trains hard and he's really into it. It's not just doing it for the hell of it. He loves boxing, and but I don't know. It's hard to say what somebody in their mid-50s are going to do. But I think Mike's going to try to beat him. I don't think he's going to ease up on the guy. So I think the best thing about this fight, it's not an exhibition, is it? I don't know. Whatever it is, they're going to fight.
No. I don't know who knows. Last I heard, it's not.
Okay, well, anyway, the thing that's good about it is a lot of people who have never watched boxing will watch it, and maybe will gain some new fans. Because they see they'll realize that boxing is not just for people that are online.
Yeah,
right. I mean, you'd have to think that this is probably the biggest. I mean, there's been fights on network television. Over the years, especially with PBC, but to have Tyson on Netflix, which is in 230 million households or whatever, or subscribers, this could be huge.
Yeah, I think that's it will be have a very large audience. I don't really know how much, but on if you got Netflix, it's free, and so. I'm probably going to record it because it's going to be somebody else somewhere else that night. But I think that's the best thing about it, that so many people that don't really follow real boxing, and I think we're going to get a few of them to become real boxing fans out of that many people, But who's going to win? Who do you think?
Well,
I have no idea.
Yeah, my opinion about the whole event is that it's really just an event. I'm not sure if it's going to gain any more boxing fans, because if you think about it, you're going to have one group of fans watching that used to watch Tyson back in the day, and they're familiar with him and they want to see what he can do at age 58. And your other group are going to be the young YouTube crowd who has been following Jake Paul. And I don't think once this fight is over that those types of fans are going to add to the collection of boxing fans that we have now. The people that are watching Tyson are going to watch fights because they're boxing fans and they've been boxing fans a long time. The Jake Paul fans are basically going to follow Jake Paul, and they're probably not going to pay for the next Canelo pay-per-view or, the Tank Davis fight coming up. So,
well, I think because there's going to be millions that's going to watch this, some of them will. I mean, when you've got those, tens of millions of people, hey, if we only get 10,000 new boxing fans, that would be good. So I think it's just the sheer number. What you're saying about, that not everybody or most of the people will become full-time boxing fans. I think the number of people who see it is so large that we're going to get a little bit of them, you know?
Right.
Yeah, maybe.
And
Um,
then boxing's going to screw it up because they won't figure out how to capitalize on this. You know, the next fight that people are going to say, well, what's coming up? Who's going to fight who? And it's going to be probably some sort of bum fight that's coming up. I remember not so long ago, you always had a big fight coming up, even after the big fight just finished, whether it was a Mosley fight or a De La Hoya fight or a Floyd fight that was coming up or a Bernard Hopkins fight. There was always something down the pike that was coming up next that was kept already captivating people's interest. But in this sport day and age, not so much. Even when Terrence Crawford is coming up, that's not the kind of fight that's capturing a lot of attention. But you know, I really just see this as a one big event coming up. I think Netflix is going to benefit a great deal through this, and I know they've got some things coming up. And it's nothing against Jake Paul. I think he's doing a great thing. I think one of the best thing he's doing is the Taylor Serrano fight.
Oh, yeah.
That's on
Their first fight was wonderful.
yeah, I mean that's huge, and I'm probably looking forward to that fight as much as any other on the card. And that's
Definitely.
I think what you mentioned about him really being invested in the sport and not really just trying to siphon from it. I think that makes him very credible.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, it's unusual, you know, it's a different kind of thing. I don't know. I think it's just easy to say if Mike can hit him, he's going to go.
Mhm.
But can Jake Paul outbox him? Maybe. He's a lot younger. He's probably a lot faster with his feet, at least. Maybe not with his hands. But if they just put another heavyweight in there that'd be retired, you know, well, George Foreman was 45 when he won the heavyweight championship from Michael Moore. But George Foreman is a super person. It's like he's not even really human. I think that it's just as I said. I just think that a certain amount of these people, maybe a small percentage of the overall audience, will become boxing fans. But
and it could be a direct result of the Serrano Taylor fight if it's anywhere near as good as the first one was.
Oh, I think it will be. I mean, I'm really happy that women's boxing has got so big. Because I had a women's column in the Ring magazine. I never had that before. Why did I want it? Because they work hard. It's a terribly tough sport. Most of them have really good fights. You know, I can remember back in the days when it was just a novelty to have maybe a 4 or 6 rounder between two women. We're talking what, the early 90s or maybe the 80s. If they didn't really box very well, they used to fight their ass off. You don't see many really bad fights between women. And of course, as soon as Golden Boy got rid of me, they took the column out. But you know, that's all right. That's, you know, whatever they want to do. But I've always been in favor of them. And now that they're making decent money and they're much more popular, people know who they are. I think that's good. I mean, you know you're going to see a good fight. And when it's the men boxers, you don't always know. You know, you think you're going to see a good fight, but you don't always be, you know. Pacquiao Mayweather, how terrible, but that's the biggest money fight in history.
Yeah.
I think it killed a lot of boxing fans, you know, they don't want to fight anymore. But yeah.
Last question, last topic I want to talk about is that 42 years ago today was maybe the biggest, I guess, happening or, you know, boxing event, not event, but circumstance, maybe of all of our careers, is Boom Boom Mancini knocking out Dooku Kim and the tragedy that followed that. What do you remember about that, Nigel?
Well, obviously, any time a boxer dies as a result of a boxing match, it's a terrible thing. But I think we all know it's going to happen every now and then. And the boxers know it's going to happen every now and then. But every time I talk to a boxer, and I've talked to a lot of boxers, I ask them if they're worried about getting brain damage from boxing. And they've all said the same thing. Oh, no, I train really, really hard, and, I live clean. Doesn't make any difference, but that's what they think. They're delusional. I mean, most boxers are delusional. I don't say that to insult them, but I guess they couldn't really do it if they weren't delusional.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the mindset of the football players too nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Take the field and they take all those hits, and we've seen the results of that. And a lot of them are like you say, well, that's not going to happen to me, or the pay and the financial reward is so great that they basically ignore some of the risk involved of the sport. And that's a lot with boxing and MMA and race car driving and a lot of these other sports.
Well, my friend and writer Bill Detloff, you're familiar with him. When we talk about this, his opinion is that most boxers, not all, of course, come from very poor backgrounds, and they wouldn't have made the money they did if they wasn't boxing. They wouldn't have traveled if it wasn't boxing. So, and every boxer, he's going to, if you're big time boxers, they're all going to have a few years where they're like king of the world. The money's rolling in, everybody loves them. So boxers, they must know in the back of their mind, but they never want to admit it, that something's probably going to happen to you. I mean, if it's happening to a guy like, Sugar Ray Robinson, all the great fighters, look at Ali. I mean, it's the very best fighters get injured or die. And it doesn't really seem to keep anybody out of the sport if they want to be a boxer. And we watch it. That's why I say it's an underground sport, and it always has been.
Speaking of Bill Detloff, I wrote a story for him on Wilfred Benitez in Ringside Seat. And,
I remember that.
He's the prime example of a fighter who was just, talk about, ability. I mean, he is the youngest world champion in boxing history. He was winning national titles at the age of 8 or 9. He was just phenomenally talented. But, at the end of the day, he is now he's a shell of what he used to be. And it's just a sad, but unfortunately typical case with fighters, is that a lot of times that's the way they end up.
What's unusual? There's a lot of really good boxers, not fighters, that don't really take Jimmy Young, for instance, another Philadelphia fighter. He wasn't a slugger. He was a very good boxer. I remember he beat George Foreman, but he didn't seem that he was taking as much punishment as other boxers, because, he remember when he fought Ali and he kept sticking his head out of the ring, so he didn't get hit. He's not in very good shape either. So I don't really think, I used to think, if you're not a slugger or you have a very good defense. And let's just flash back to Floyd. I remember his uncle, Roger. He had a lot of brain damage, and I think it was around that time that Mayweather decided to change his style. Mm-hmm. I don't blame him. I didn't really want to watch him. I had to cover him, but I think it was the smart thing for him to do.
Yeah, I remember him saying it's not cool to take punishment, and so that's when he became
Now,
the fighter. He became the
who
second half of
knows?
his career.
Who knows how he's going to be in another 10, 15 years? I hope he's great. But,
Right.
uh, and I tell you another thing you're talking about, you were saying about when there's a fight, there's something, coming up after it that people are looking forward to.
Mhm.
Fighters, the top fighters that make a lot of money, they don't fight much.
No.
Some just once a year, two a year. It's almost like 3 fights a year is a long for a contender or a champion to fight.
Mhm.
We have this fighter in Philadelphia, Boots Ennis, and he went more than a year
Yeah.
without a fight.
And lost all of his momentum, right? He was the biggest things in sliced bread, and now it seems to have been lost, the momentum that I know he fought on Saturday, but kind of seems like he didn't capitalize when he should have.
Well, a lot of that was, I don't know, this was, every fighter has a bad fight. You know what I mean? Whether he wins or loses, he have bad fights. So I hadn't seen Boots until I was in Washington when he fought the guy the first time, and he won almost practically every round. It wasn't that exciting, but he was just dominating the fight. But in Philly last Saturday, the guy was much more aggressive and landed a lot more punches. And I don't know exactly. I mean, Boots did knock him down once, and he definitely won the fight. But I think maybe that's just one of his fights that everybody has now and then. But up until that point, Saturday night, a lot of people, a lot of fighters didn't want to fight him. It might be a good thing that he can get bigger fights.
Yeah.
I noticed that Bud Crawford wrote I don't know whether he was it online. I guess it must have been online that telling him what I just said. Don't get discouraged. We all have bad nights now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to fight Bud. You know what I mean? But I think it's a shame that Bud Crawford's not a superstar. I mean, he's really probably one of the best one or two fighters in the world. But I mean, he's making pretty good money now, but he's not a superstar. And but he's really good. I mean, I love the way he can adapt to the guy he's fighting, and when maybe the fight will change from a boxing match to a punching match, he can it's very good to be able to change and to suit the situation if you're a boxer and not just still keep doing the same thing. And Bud's very good at that.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the greats did. I mean, you think about Tommy Hearns when he went into some fights with Ray. Even Ray, you thought he was going to be the slugger, and he turned out to be the boxer. And then you saw Ray really hunker down and become, this animal late in that fight and do things you didn't really expect him to do. So yeah, the beauty of a great fighter is being able to adapt in that ring and figure out some way to get the win.
Sugar Ray Leonard was a great fighter. He might be the best fighter since Ali. I'm not saying that that's it, but I said might be. He certainly now, because his fight with Hagler, that argument of who really won is still going on with boxing fans, and probably always. Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of an interesting thing. I was at the fight. I had a good seat. And I thought Ray won in the last round. I thought it was even going into the last round. And he was punching off the ropes with combinations and definitely won the last round. And I think that was the only difference. And also, I think the fight with Hearns and Mugabe took a lot out of Hagler. He wasn't the Hagler, he was in his prime. And I think that's because Mugabe was a hell of a puncher.
Yep.
You know, and it was a long fight, and they both got punched a lot. And well, we know Hearns, it was like a 15 rounder and 2.5 rounds. That was a great fight to cover. When people ask me what's the greatest fight I've ever seen, I can't really say. There's so many of them, but just to give them an answer, I always say that it was Hearns and Hagler.
Look, Nigel, why did Hagler fight Southpaw for the first 5 rounds of that fight?
I don't know. I think there was also something that a mistake he made even before the fight. It was about money. Hagler wanted a 15 rounder, and he might have won a 15 rounder. Who knows? But he ended up compromising by taking an extra $1 million. So, I think that was a mistake. But maybe not. Sugar Ray was really good. He's really good, and he was a pretty nice guy. I mean, he still is, But I don't even know what he's doing now. But I know he had a lot of endorsements. I think what a lot that Sugar Ray does now, when companies have like some sort of banquet or something, or some sort of meeting on the corporate level, they hire celebrities to come in and talk. And I know that Ray has done a lot of that kind of work.
Yeah, I think he's probably enjoying his time away from the ring. I mean, he's certainly earned it.
Yeah, I don't think he was very good color commentator, but because what would happen when one of the other commentators would say something, and then he sort of repeat the same thing in different words. But that's the only bad thing I could say about him. But I think he's a nice guy. He was a great fighter, and I enjoyed most all of his fights.
Real quick, we were talking about, he used to be with HBO, obviously, and I remember, George, when you were talking about, people would ask, okay, what's next? This fight's over, what's next? And I remember right after Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, Lampley said, okay, coming up in a month, or less than a month, Julio Cesar Chavez versus Meldrick Taylor.
Yeah.
Wendy, I mean, you just had, back then, you seemed to have super fight after super fight after super fight, seemed like the big fight.
Back then, and years before that, boxers wanted to box. And, you look at guys like, some of them had 100 fights in a year, it's crazy. Like, I knew Bob Montgomery, the lightweight champion. He was, pretty old at the time, but he was a very nice guy. He just died of old age. And this was really remarkable. When I was interviewing him, he knew every fight that he had, and he knew how much money he made. From his very first fight through the end of his career, he knew how much money he made. He was a very friendly guy, and of course he fought Bojack a lot in the big fights and stuff like that. And he was a really good. And I'll tell you something. I know I'm talking too much here, but this last thing I'm going to say about Bob Montgomery, him and his manager were the two people that stopped the Philadelphia promoters putting the black writers in a different section. Wow. In other words, Bob Montgomery and his manager said, we're not going to fight unless you put the black writers with everybody else. And they did. So that was something I thought that, Bob Montgomery was a really cool thing to do.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, Nigel, we kept you about a half hour longer than I said I would, but
I told you I like to talk boxing.
Hey, you can come on the show whenever you want. This is like, this is great. It's like a history lesson. Talk about Bob Montgomery and the guys that you've covered over the years. So, thank you very much for taking the time to be on here. Can't wait to read your new book.
Yeah, it's an anthology. As I told you before, I started writing boxing in the 70s. I don't have any of that material, but that doesn't really bother me because I'm a much better writer now. But the oldest story is 1980, and then right up until today. And I think it's 40 something stories in there. And if you don't like one, you can read the other one.
We'll do that.
If you do buy it at Amazon,
Okay.
you're allowed to write a review.
Okay.
All right.
Noted.
All right, George, you going back to Australia or you back there already?
I'm in Australia. I actually spoke with Jeff Finnick a couple of days ago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and Jeff
How's he doing?
He's doing fine. He was in Cabo or something like that. But he had talked to Mike Tyson maybe a week earlier, and Jeff was his trainer for Mike's last fight 19 years ago against Kevin.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
He was the one that threw in the towel. So he basically thinks Mike's got to get the fight over with quickly, first or second round, and his sort of game plan would be to wait for Jake Paul to commit himself and then counter off that and try to land the big punch. And he says if Mike hits him, he's going down, but it's got to happen soon because at 58, he can't be in there very long.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how hard he trained. I'm sure he trained as hard as he could. But age, boy, we all know that. Things change as you get older. I still go to the gym 5 days a week, but I'm just trying to maintain.
You're not training for a fight.
Great. I really enjoyed this. And send me a link when you say it's ready.
Will do. Nigel, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.